Ji, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have a very, very special guest with us today. Mr. Zouhair Khaliq has 40 years of global experience in executive leadership, board strategy, managing startups, scale ups, and turnarounds. He was instrumental in setting up the National Incubation Center in Pakistan and has held various board positions across the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan. As a former CEO of Mobilink, he grew the company to 32 million customers and $1.4 billion in revenue. He has led major refinancing activities, including at Orscom Group and Varek Telecom, and spearheaded the launch of digital banking ventures in Bangladesh and Tunisia. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Zohair Saab, mashallah, your journey has aligned with the growth of telecom in Pakistan. You really were revolutionary in the telecom space. Can you take us back to the early years a little bit? I remember when I was a kid, the first telecom company that I interacted with was Sparktel.
Yes.
And then, Mobilink came in all of a sudden with vastly superior technology, and it just transformed the landscape completely. So, what were the early days of telecom like, the pioneer days? And what opportunities did you see, at that time, which led you to believe that Mobilink and the solution that you proposed was the future for Pakistan?
It's a long story, Nassir, but thank you for asking it. The early days, I can take you back to about 1991 when Instaphone and Paktel launched in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And they operated under something called the AMPS network. So it was a non-digital form of mobile telephony.
Yeah.
And as it happens, BMCL, which later was branded as Mobilink,
Yeah.
Pakistan Mobile Communications Limited, was also a bidder for the same time, but lost at the time. And so they actually rebid and then contested the award of the licenses. And finally, after much to do, they got a license in early 93, I think.
Yeah.
And then at that time, originally the partners with CEF Telecom, which is a local company that we know, were partnered with British Telecom. But those guys exited when the license wasn't awarded, and Motorola subsequently came in. So my own journey is that I was at ICI Pakistan for about 7 years, and basically FMCG company. And I realized at some stage that it wasn't exciting enough for me. So I wanted to do something different. And Instaphone offered me a job. I took it, realized that it wasn't exactly what I had thought it would be. And I quit 11 months later. And that's when I was approached by Motorola at the time. And I joined as CFO for a company that became Mobilink later on. Mobilink was the first GSM operator from the Motorola's own portfolio as well.
And just for the clarity of our viewers, what is the difference between GSM and what existed previously?
So basically digital technology, right? And also encryption. So in the apps networks, one of the issues was that you could actually tune in on an FM radio and listen to two people talking to if you knew the frequency. You could just
I think I might even remember having done that.
There was only one TV channel in those times.
There was, that's right.
So this was the other alternative entertainment in these
Gee.
things. So when Mobilink launched, it was a GSM network, and we came up with quite a bit of noise and excitement. And one of the things we also did at the time was that Paktel and Instaphone were still selling handsets for up to 100,000 rupees a pop. And 100,000 rupees today is a lot of money. We're talking 30 plus years
It was
ago.
massive.
It was massive.
Inflation adjusted, it would probably be like over $1 million rupees.
Over $1 million rupees in today's money.
Yeah.
Right? So what Mobilink did at the time was they brought in a Motorola handset, very fancy looking, with a flip at the front, and they marketed it for about, if I remember correctly, about 30,000 rupees.
Wow.
Okay. And our approach from day one was that this is going to be something that the masses will adopt rather than just the elite.
Did you see it having the kind of mass penetration it does now, where it's like hundreds of millions of users, really?
So to be honest, no, Nassir, because I remember putting together the first business plan, and after much research, I presented it to Motorola, who were the majority shareholders, and then of course the board with Zef Telecom as well. And it said, if we ever get to 100,000 customers,
oh my
it will
God.
be a great success.
Oh my God. And how many customers does the network have today?
So Mobilink, now rebranded as Jazz, today has 70 million customers.
Wow.
And the country as a whole, according to PTA's website yesterday, has 193 million customers.
That is unbelievable. So that's like 2/3 of the population,
Yes,
essentially,
well,
yeah?
80% teledensity, that's the phrase we use, which is it measures amount of penetration into the population. So we have an 80%.
And all those folks have data access also.
139 million connections have broadband access.
So about
Make up
half your
to-
population.
Yes, but you want to discount that because a lot of people have more than one connection. So even if you said, all right, let's discount it by 20%, we're still talking between 100 and 110 million customers, which is, to put context around it, twice the population of Germany.
That's amazing.
And it's that kind of size that we're looking at today. Now it's a long journey, because then what happened was that I left 3.5 years into the launch of Mobilink, and I was offered a position with Motorola in the UK, and I spent the next 5 to 6 years abroad. And Motorola meanwhile divested. That's another long story for maybe a different podcast. The reason behind that, but I came back as CEO in 2003, and to my realization at the time, between Instaphone, Parktel, Mobilink, and Ufone, which had launched by then, there were only 2 million customers in 10 years. So there was a very, very slow progress. And a lot of it had to do with the pricing. It had to do with the fact that distribution was fairly restricted. And so at that stage, having seen the world as well, and I'd been responsible for mobile launches in Egypt, in Jordan, Algeria, Tunisia, and obviously worked in the UK, etc. My learning was different, and I said, look, this is going to be something that's going to be for everybody out there. And so we restructured everything at Mobilink, and restructured the pricing, we restructured the way we billed everybody, and we went from 1 million customers to 32 million, as you mentioned earlier, in 5 years, and later with the acquisition of Zouhair A for another about 16 to 18 million customers, and then growing organically. Mobilink stands at 70 million today, and then of course the rest is owned by Telenor, which is merging into PTCL now, and Ufone and China Mobile Song. So it's been a fantastic, interesting journey over that 30-year period. What we have to realize today is that, like the rest of the world, this is your primary access to everything. Right? It's your access to news, and to, dare I call it, fake news, and social media.
Financial inclusivity.
Everything. Financial inclusivity.
Education.
Is now going into e-commerce, for example. You can order your groceries online.
We have an online A-level program in Beaconhouse, so democratization, or we can talk about that.
Absolutely. So that becomes your little handheld now today. Is everything, right? It's even your alarm clock and in your watch. So it has come a long, long way from where it used to be. And I think one of the things I've never regretted is having moved out of FMCG and all that boring stuff to do this, because in 30 some years now, there's never been a dull, boring day. It's always something exciting.
So it's been, it's been an amazing growth journey for the telecom sector. I'm wondering if you feel that there's, in this amazing journey, anything that the sector could have done better. Is there anything they've missed? The user base is huge, but what would your advice to current active telecom leaders be? What are the blind spots that they may have missed in this journey?
So that's a very interesting question, because even I can take you back to the early 2000s, and I used to visit Motorola headquarters regularly, and there was always this big discussion, very anxiety-filled discussion about, will the mobile operators become a dumb pipe? Okay, and guess what? They have. 20 some years later, they are dumb pipes, if you want to call it that, because all they're doing is selling data.
Yeah.
Okay, your Facebook, your Google, your Instagram, and WhatsApp, and everything else is just traveling over that. They are the ones who are making money, but the telco operators haven't seen any of that growth.
Okay.
In addition, what has happened is that you used to go somewhere abroad, you would make international phone calls.
Yep.
Now you just WhatsApp, or you take one of the other various apps that are now in the marketplace. Even calling from on roaming, for example. In the old days, you got a whopping roaming bill when you came back.
Oh yeah.
But that's gone away as well because you're just using WhatsApp and stuff too.
You just need a data connection. You get a local data SIM and you're set.
You're done as well, right? And with the eSIM thing coming in now, that's become even easier.
Yeah.
So the telco operators, not just in Pakistan, but I think across the world, have lost out on that. And I think the reason is their own mindset, because they just never anticipated how quickly this would happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And each of them tried in their own way. And I can tell you stories about Vodafone and Telefonica and others who tried that at one stage. And even Jazz, a couple of years ago, tried to launch its own version of WhatsApp. But they all failed miserably because they were much too late to the party. And customers are unwilling to move and shift to adopt all of that today.
Now, plus, customers don't want, when it comes to communication, necessarily use proprietary communication tools, right? Because one of the main objectives of a communication tool is to be able to access everyone, and any proprietary, mobile link tool would then not necessarily be interoperable with other telecom providers, right?
And that's what people realize very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's become the bane of the telco operators.
Yeah.
And I think it's, as I said, it's just too late to the party at this stage. Now, there is still a lot out there which can be done. But it's a very long discussion. You can get into all of the stuff that we talked about earlier in terms of fintech and e-commerce and agri-tech and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But when I talk to a lot of these people today, they are of the mindset that they are a big operator, they're making their money, whatever it is, and they're fine.
Okay.
They don't want to go into the risk model. And again, look at it from a corporate point of view, Nassir, because you come with something like this and you have a plan which says, in 3 to 5 years, we will make this much more. And even the shareholders and the board sometimes are just not willing to go down that route because they say, let's stick to the quarter end.
Yeah.
Because we just need to make sure there's a few penny increase in the share price and whatever. And that's become the paradigm.
So there's a lack of ambition almost, it seems.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
And also I think what it is that most of the people who've come to those positions in decision-making levels are career telco people. And they're either engineers or maybe some of them came through the finance or the marketing side of things. So digital thinking is not something that comes naturally. It's something that they need to learn from others. And one of the reasons that I came back 7 years ago and was, as you mentioned, launched the National Incubation Center was with the ambition that we would, we have so much young talent in this country. We have so many people who are perfectly capable of doing amazing things. And this was intended to be a platform given to those people so they could come up with new technology.
Yeah.
They could come up with, as I said, fintech, agri-tech, and e-commerce, and so on. And it would be for the telcos to then go in and work with them, acquire them, partner with them. And so on, which they've not been very successful in to date.
So is that, tell me, and this is interesting because I'm also, I'm associated with some companies which have tried to, and have actually even had partnerships with telcos at various times. I don't think anything has scaled really in a major way. Is that because of the startup founders and the folks running, all the tech companies, or is it more attributable to the telcos? What is the combination of reasons you think that those successful link-ups aren't happening? And also, are they happening anywhere else in the world? Because even if you look outside of Pakistan, it still seems like telcos are just telcos, and the guys that own the digital platforms are separate. There don't seem to be any major case studies of successful partnerships.
So you're absolutely correct. There aren't. And for the reasons I've just described, the mindsets are very different. And certainly for the technology companies, the ones who are inventing the new stuff, they are very entrepreneurial in their thinking, which they need to be. Whereas, as I said, these are corporates now. They are big giants with
and they don't really have that that sort of startup mindset, really, right? They're not agile and nimble, maybe in some.
So that's become the barrier.
Okay.
There are examples of people going and acquiring. For example, if you look at the UAE today, Etisalat or EAN as it's called now, it's acquired parts of Careem. They've acquired Stars Play, which is about basically gaming and video content over the mobile phone, etc. So all of that is sometimes happening. We still need to see where it goes. Again, I'll take you back to 2007 when I was still at Mobilink as CEO. So my team and I were working on three aspects, which we said at the time, and remember I'm talking now nearly 17 years ago. We said we will acquire a landline fiber optic company. So likes of Airtel, Stone Fiber, whatever, or build one. We were actually in the process of finalizing a contract to buy a media house. The whole media industry had just taken off with General Sharaf's initiatives at the time. And we said we'll own a media company. So we own our own content. So Netflix today, perhaps. And thirdly, we were then going for a digital bank in those days and actually had almost acquired a license. Things changed. I moved out. Other people came in. They had different priorities. But if you can imagine, if you'd done that 16 or 17 years ago, you would own the landline to the home. You would own the wireless broadband. You would own content, and you would build them with your own billing system. So it would have been a completely different paradigm in terms of the ARPU, as we call it, the average revenue per user, for the telco. Because today we get a lot of bleating and crying about it being very low. It's obviously exacerbated by the rupee dollar depreciation as well. And remember, all of the operators that we have, substantially except for phone, are majority owned by foreign companies. So they obviously look at the dollar return.
Which has taken a major hit in recent times.
So that's where we are at.
So just moving, I suppose we spoke about the telco side of things. Now moving on to because one of the other things you've been very active in is the startup ecosystem. As you said that you have played a pivotal role in launching the National Incubation Center. You've explored the VC ecosystem as well. One of the things I'm curious about is that on the face of it, 150% of the population having data access in a country the size of Pakistan, should be a gold mine, really, right? We should have foreign investors, breaking our doors down, basically, queuing up. There are countries with much smaller populations which have attracted a huge amount of investment, and it's really propelled their GDP and economy. We had a bit of I remember a few years ago, money started flowing in, and then suddenly it stopped. And despite this amazing 4G penetration, whether it's fintech or agri-tech or ag-tech or any tech, I think with the exception of mobility, like your Ubers and Careems, which have kind of scaled here, nobody else seems to have been able to scale. And investment has also kind of not come in as expected. What are some of the reasons for that?
So, how long have you got?
No, and I remember the pitch, like when VCs launched their, and it makes sense, their thesis is that Pakistan is valued many times lower on a per capita basis in terms of the investment it's attracting than companies with similar demographics. Like, why is that? I know it's a long conversation, but
so look, I think a few fundamentals. When you are an investor sitting abroad, It doesn't matter whether you're looking at Pakistan or Vietnam or Bangladesh or Cambodia, whatever, or Africa for that matter. You're looking at investing and getting a return, just like any normal human being.
Yep.
Right? Now, when you look at some of these other countries, you know that there is a reasonable amount of financial and political stability across them. When we look at Pakistan, you see this turmoil, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. We've seen a huge amount of political instability, uncertainty. We've seen it take a financial hit because of that. And so investors are generally a little more wary. I'll give you a little example just of the VC funding you mentioned earlier. And I know you and I had a conversation a couple of years ago about this. So let me give you some numbers, which just describe in itself. In 2020, VC funding in Pakistan was about $77 million, so a very small amount in world terms. In 2021, that went up to 382 million. So it's almost 5 times.
5x. Yeah.
5x, right? In 2022, it was 362 million.
Okay.
And in 2023, it was 27 million.
Really? It went from over 300 million to 27 million.
Wow. And this year, I think we are hearing maybe 10 or 15 million so far. And it's the end of October.
Yeah.
And the reasons are what I described earlier. It's the uncertainty that goes through, and people think, well, I'm not sure I'm going to put money in here. And worst of all is, for example, yes, we're sitting at a 277 rupees to the dollar, but nobody knows whether it's going to go to 3. I met a banker in Karachi the day before yesterday, and he said, Zouhair, according to me, it's going to be 400 rupees to the dollar.
Yeah, you know where his political leanings are.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's the fundamentals, right? And we were talking earlier when we were having coffee. It's about also the mindset. We have infrastructure in place, but the machinery, the bureaucracy is unwilling to move with that.
Yeah.
And that becomes another problem in today's world, because everything is digital for the rest of the world. I was giving somebody an example earlier. A friend of mine applied for his British passport while he was overseas. And all he had to do was download an app and take a picture in the right way and send it all back on email. Yeah. And 48 hours later, he had his passport. Our urgent passport in Pakistan today is apparently 2 months. Wow. Urgent. Yeah. So if you're not urgent, it could be more than that.
More than that.
Okay. So it just shows you the machinery at work, which is, again, I mean, we could debate forever.
It comes down to ease of business, right? It's I think political instability combined with a lack of ease of doing business is a major issue.
Look again, the SECP, the FPR, State Bank of Pakistan need to look at all of this stuff. Just to give you a small example, earlier we talked about fintech. So now, yes, there are multiple fintech companies in Pakistan who are growing a little and scaling, but not to the extent that one would have imagined. Why? I asked a couple of years ago, I was at Kosar Market, and I went to the fruit and veg shop at the end of the corner. And I offered him my debit card, and he refused. And he said, no, sir, we don't take cards here. And he pointed me to a sign behind him. And I asked him why. And he said, well, if I take a card from you, and this is 2.5 years ago, I don't know what the number is today, but he said, I have to pay the guys who bring in the fresh fruit and veg in the morning from the farms in cash. Yeah. If I take your card, it'll take me 5 days to get your money into my bank. Now, it could have reduced a little bit today, I don't know, but it's not instant even today. And for that man, it matters, right? And you multiply that by the number of Karyana stores in the country.
Like messes up his whole working capital cycle, basically.
And no bank is willing to give him a working capital of $1 million, for example.
Yeah. Maybe now they are, because now you have, fintech platforms enabling these small short-term loans for retailers,
small.
Right?
Again, very small. And again, we are not utilizing the database which is being created at this stage to the extent that we can. I know a lot of my friends will later on come back and shout at me for saying negative things, but it's just not happening quick enough. I think it needs to happen quicker. There is the infrastructure is all there. We just need to make it happen. And the potential is huge.
Absolutely. What kind of advice do you have for, young people who are wanting to become entrepreneurs, start, tech companies and become part of this digital transformation ecosystem? What are some of the top 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give them?
Lots of patience, lots of resilience, and an eye on the longer term rather than the shorter term. I think these are the 3 main things that I would focus on. It takes a lot more to do the same stuff in Pakistan because of all the issues we just discussed. Right now, until the uncertainty settles down and we have a more financially stable economy, the best thing to do is not to expect lots of VC money coming in. But if you can have a business model which is sound, then you can continue to grow your business, but slowly. And that's where the resilience comes in.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the view on the long term is it won't happen in 2 or 3 years. But then again, this is another issue which has been a bit of a fallacy in our country today. If you look at Silicon Valley, it's taken them over 50 years to start producing unicorns, as we call them today, the $1 million companies. We've been at it for 7 or 8 years, and with all the rocky road in the middle as well. Even if you look at a classic example like Careem, they started in 2009, and it was 2019 when Uber bought them out for a very big sum of money. 10 years. So it does take, if not 9 to 10 years today, at least 5 to 7 years in today's world. And that's why I mean a little bit of a longer perspective on whatever you start. But the potential is there. We keep talking about it, right? We have a 250 million population. 65% of them are below the age of 30. Absolutely. And they are the ones who are potential users, and they are obviously growing. So I think it's all there, but it just needs a much slower, more arduous route than it would be in some of the other countries.
No, absolutely. And so, one of the obviously things that we've been talking about a lot recently, and we did also in the recent conference that we had, which you were actually a part, is some of the impact that, for example, artificial intelligence is now having on the workplace. So, just because this is something that our, obviously young people who are graduating, our students, it's something very pertinent to them. What do you think are the competencies and skills they need to focus on right now? Because it's accelerating. AI is accelerating at such a rapid pace. It's very difficult to imagine what jobs it's going to replace and what jobs it's going to create and what the future ecosystem of the job market will look like. What would you say to young people who are looking to enter the job market in the next 3 or 4 years? What sort of competencies, skills and knowledge should they be focusing on to ensure that they remain relevant?
So I think, again, it's a very big topic to explore. Look, AI is coming in. There's a lot of hype. Today, AI is simply about accumulating a lot of data at a very rapid pace. Okay, what used to take you days on an encyclopedia, later on Google, it take a couple of minutes, is now taking a couple of seconds to download all of that. It is certainly not yet at a stage where it can replace your thinking or your brain. Or it shouldn't. If it's doing that, then we are in a real mess. Okay. So,
but in some cases it is, though. It depends on what level of creativity, I suppose, that activity requires.
The whole thing is about, in the end, you've got to make a decision about something, right? And that decision is not just based on data. Sometimes it's based on your environment, your the feelings, your emotions, how it affects other people, and so on. So all of that is layers of complication, which I think are still not quite there at AI. Maybe people will correct me again, but that's my impression today of having tried to attempt using it. My advice to young people would be, don't be afraid of it. Okay, that's the first thing. We said that at the conference.
Absolutely,
as well. It's just more technology. Right? As we have seen in the past as well.
Hmm.
What young people in education today need to be aware of is they must have the digital skills and be aware of the tools that are required for them to explore this area. Make sure they're aware of it. Don't be surprised by it and say, oh my God, I didn't know it existed, because that would make you living under a rock somewhere.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Even more importantly, I would argue that the teachers need to step up. They need to be part of this as well, because often enough what we find is that there is this age barrier where people of a certain age are very happy to welcome and adopt new stuff, whereas people of a certain age above that are a little maybe wary, maybe afraid.
That's right.
And I think they
threatened.
And threatened.
Yeah.
And so I think they need to be able to step up so that they can work in coordination and harmony with the students to guide them in this direction.
Yeah.
The digital tools are all available there. We have them across the world. We have them in Pakistan today. And there is now digital learning which is starting to happen in Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
We recently haven't heard officially yet, but Khan Academy is coming into Pakistan.
I know. They've been recruiting people.
There you go. And so that's been a very powerful new thing that will come in. Certainly for students, young students in perhaps less, maybe more deprived areas, maybe rural areas and so on. It'll serve them as a potential. But I think what I keep saying is that in the end, education is about educating your mind, learning from it, training it to think in different ways. And that shouldn't be replaced by AI, because if that happens, then you're becoming irrelevant. And I think that's a scary situation.
No, absolutely. And I think the whole purpose of human existence is to create a better, life for the sum total of humanity at the end of the day. If AI is not serving that purpose, then
it's another tool.
It is another tool. Yeah.
That's what I would say.
So you mentioned Khan Academy, and I think that's another, it's a good time to sort of segue into my next question, which is about, really how can telecom companies and educational service providers, collaborate to enhance, educational equity in Pakistan?
So I think let's take the two pieces separately. For example, yes, there is Khan Academy and there could be other models of it. But what is really required is relevant content. And by relevant content, I mean obviously the subjects that are addressed, but also the language. I mean, a country like ours, you've got to be aware of the linguistic challenges that some people might have. So your content creation is a great opportunity. And not all of it will be done by one company. It can be multiple companies. It could be new startups who are doing that and then agree to sell that content perhaps and monetize their product. So that becomes an issue which is very interesting to discuss. And I think it's a great opportunity for everybody. Telcos, I'm not sure I want to go down that route again, because they have their own mindsets. A lot of the time they will just say, oh, we can do this ourselves. And that becomes the barrier.
And they often can't.
They can't. Almost never.
Almost.
But that's the issue. And they need to be able to recognize that there will be other people who will offer this, and how can we, coordinate with them, partner with them, and so on. I think that's going to be an important area. A lot of the IT companies in Pakistan could take this as an opportunity themselves and work with the likes of Beaconhouse and other institutions to say, how do we package this knowledge, this course, if you will, and say 10 chapters of it into something that makes sense and can be pushed over a mobile device.
No, absolutely. I think AI also presents a lot of opportunities for education inclusion. We're getting to a stage now where, you can have AI-enabled systems which supplement the physical teacher in the teaching process so that you can, train and educate a larger number of students with fewer human resources, which in a poor country like Pakistan, which has a dearth of human resources, using AI to further scale the reach of your existing quality teachers can also be a big opportunity.
I would caveat that a little bit by saying what I said earlier. You must not take away the human interaction.
Which is why I didn't say replace, because it's so important.
So it's there to enhance all of this.
That's right.
Because at the end of the day, that human interaction is so vital. Whether it's between the students or between the teacher and the student, I think that is key to creating a worthwhile human being. So you can supplement with AI wherever there is an opportunity, but we should never assume that it will somehow take over everything. And I think that, again, to me, that's scary.
That is scary because, I mean, if it does take over everything, then arguably, humanity has become, obsolete essentially, which is really not what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to enhance the quality of human existence.
Yeah. And I think especially in Pakistan, because we are that much more perhaps emotional as a race, as a community. And I think taking all of that away is going to take something critical away from the development cycle. So I think we need to be able to analyze that and balance it in the right way.
Absolutely. So, when you kind of look at sort of the digital transformation ecosystem in Pakistan, right? I'm just wondering, because a lot of our young students will probably be going into entrepreneurship. What are sort of like the specific use cases or processes which you feel are ripe for digital disruption that you feel young people should really be focusing on right now?
Almost everything.
Okay.
If you look at, for example, our agri-tech or the agricultural sector, it's huge. And we are still based on literally ancient methodology in how we source our seed, sow our crop, how we harvest it, and so on. And there is so much happening in the world which can change all of that. Similarly, even product to market from the farms is something that needs to change.
And there are some people who are working on that, these digital aarti sort of, solutions,
but
those
also,
are there.
For example, transportation to, fresh fruit and veg to the marketplace.
Okay.
We lose, I think, something like 40% of our product on the way to market. And by the time it gets there, and because we have hot weather as well, that becomes a challenge, right? And
is it really as high as 40%?
I believe one of the startups was telling me.
That's quite incredible. I mean, that seems like major efficiencies can be built in there. Yeah.
So imagine the productivity that can be increased in that sector, for example. You look at the e-commerce sector, for example. Now, again, some numbers that were given to me by different people, and I checked on Euromonitor, which is a credible source. Pakistan's e-commerce market today, they've said, is about $160 billion US.
Okay.
That's a lot of money. It's forecast to grow to 200 billion by 2030. Most of it is cash. It's not documented.
Yeah.
Now imagine if you even documented 10% of that.
What a major impact
impact it would have on the national economy and also just the credibility of what goes on here. And if the fintechs then bought into that and started doing that, imagine where they could take this to. So those are just some of the sectors. But I left out EdTech and Medtech, which again we talked about earlier. Medtech again is something that is absolutely critical to people like us here in Pakistan.
Yeah, where healthcare is not equally available to everyone at all.
So, a couple of startups which are really worth mentioning here is Sehat Kahani, for example, and MedIQ, two very, very ambitious startups which are doing an incredible job already. And we need to encourage people like that and take it further because it will enable so much of our medical resources to get to the right people at the right time.
Do you have any specific recommendations for policymakers in terms of what can be done to bring more investment into Pakistan? What sort of structures can be set up other than addressing the political stability pain point, that address the other pain points of foreign investors in Pakistan?
So, as I said earlier, an investor is looking for a return and he's looking at a 10-year, 20-year cycle. He's not looking for 6 months or whatever. That's just the stock market. So, I think given the political setup that we have in our country, if we can all come to an agreement that we have is not just a charter of democracy, but a charter of economics, where we agree that certain policies which are held in place for, let's say, at least a 10-year period. Doesn't matter whose government comes in and whose government goes out and voted out and whatever, that we keep going on doing. As long as we have a stable 10-year policy in place, investors will look at it in a much more positive light, because that's what they're looking to do.
I guess that's, what the SIFC is partially meant to do in some ways.
Yeah, we'll see how that pans out. It's early days at the moment. But I think that's really what is required, is that stability in the economic policies and the cycles, not, hey, you can't take your money out, hey, you can't do this, and all of the rest of the stuff that keeps happening. We need to recognize that an investor coming from abroad will need to take his money out in terms of dividends and
repatriation of funds is a major issue.
Even for our own countrymen who are based abroad. For example, the VC fund we were talking about. They're afraid to put even $100,000 into the country because they are not sure they'll get 100,000 back. Because even if you're growing at a startup at, let's say, 10 or 15%,
your
devaluation is at more than that, then you're not going to get that money back.
And even if you do end up making money, you then struggle to repatriate it. So what ends up happening is then a lot of these investments are domiciled outside of Pakistan, which means Pakistan just sees salaries being sent to the country. We don't actually see the full and other countries benefit from that investment. You're even seeing that in software export, where a lot of people are setting up, sort of offshore companies and wanting to park their money there and not bring it here.
Almost in a way being forced to do.
They're almost being forced to do that. So
even though they didn't start out with that intention, if they are to run a business and if they are to make money, they're actually being forced because we are not able to adjust our own mindset.
I agree.
And that's very important.
I think the world is so interconnected. I think there's a need to realize that some of the checks and balances that may have worked in the past now no longer work, because there's, there are ways for people to work their way around those which are ultimately harmful for the country. So maybe just a realization of that would make a big difference right now.
It will, because again, I think the issue, as I said earlier, it's about the long term. We can't keep thinking 6 months or 12 months. We need to start thinking 10 to 20 years.
Exactly.
And hold policies in place, because imagine those businesses.
Or even 5 years, I would say, by the way. Even 5 years is a pretty decent cycle. We're usually thinking about 6 months,
So, countries are built on long-term policies. And if you can, once people understand that that's how it's going to be, they were far more willing to come in, even if there is a little bit of a hiccup in, instability in financial or political terms. But as long as they know that there is a long-term policy which will not be disturbed, I think it's far more beneficial to the country in the long run.
Absolutely. So, Zouhair Saab, thank you for joining us. It's been absolutely amazing to have you on the show. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about, your early days in the telecom sector, and how the sector has evolved. We've talked about, the AI disruption and really what that means for Pakistan and for our young people and how they need to address such challenges. I think it's been really useful. Mashallah, you have such a breadth of experience that it's sometimes difficult to condense everything into a short podcast. But thank you very much for coming in. It's certainly been very informative for me. And, and of course, we hope that you will come and mentor our students and speak to them and we can have more detailed conversations about some of the verticals we were discussing today. So we hope to have you at BIC much more frequently. And thank you again for being part of this podcast.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege. I think we just need to recognize that the world is moving very fast.
Yeah.
And we need to keep up with it. And I think some of the stuff that we've discussed hopefully takes us in that direction.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ji.